Really thought that Caleb just hit the nail on the head with his column at offthehooksports.com. Rick Barnes gets an extension. Let's get into the X's and O's of it. But first, the tenor of Caleb's column was all about this is stability in a program that has not had that traditionally. So how important is stability to the basketball Vols? Be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. We appreciate that. And if you're on a podcast platform, we would love a review. So stability, how important is it for Tennessee basketball? And let me give you an example. When I went to school in the 90s, there were times either because the basketball was so boring under Kevin O'Neal or it was Wade Houston before that, that you didn't know, even being a student on campus, if Tennessee was playing basketball. I mean, it was that bad, Caleb. And you're a little younger, so you caught a much better run. At times, a group that couldn't complete things, but at least you knew when the games were on. But let's talk about Barnes' contract extension, because this basketball program, more than anything, especially now that they've taken Thompson Bowling Arena and called it the quick checkout line brought to you by Food City, they've got to have a good basketball program. I don't know that they have to have a great basketball program, but they have to have a good basketball program, and Rick Barnes will bring you that.
Yes. What is I don't know what the phrase is, but, don't make perfect the enemy of good, or good, don't make good the enemy of perfect, or something like that. Because Rick Barnes, let me get this out of the way. He's the most overpaid coach in college basketball. There's not a close second. Rick Barnes is the fourth highest paid coach in college basketball right now, making about $5.88 million a year. His contract is extended through 2027, 2028. The coach is making more than him: John Calipari, Bill Self, Tom Izzo. We're talking multiple Final Fours, multiple national championships.
Five, if my count's correct, of national championships with those three guys, right?
Four.
Four.
But
okay.
Close still, and countless Final Fours. Rick Barnes has one Final Four, and it was 20 years ago. The reason you do this move from Rick Barnes is because you know what you can. If you're Tennessee, you know what can happen. So let's just go back through history real quick. For those who don't know, Rick Barnes is already the longest tenured coach at Tennessee since Don DeVoe. And Don DeVoe, you probably know more than I do, Dave, but as far as I'm aware, he was, I guess, it wasn't really forced out, but he kind of left under pressure to a certain degree, where it just didn't seem like the fan base wanted him around anymore in 1989.
Oh, yeah, he was definitely forced out. He was somewhat of a poor man's Rick Barnes. Okay, so Rick Barnes gets you to the NCAA tournament each and every year, right? Pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, Don DeVoe is the guy that got you in the talk of being in the NCAA tournament each and every year, except for some really down years. So, no, Don DeVoe it was clearly time to move on. Don DeVoe was the longest tenured coach because Tennessee didn't give one iota about basketball. They looked at football, as it still is, and it's 80 to 90% of the revenue. And at the time, you had Doug Dickey was your athletic director, a former football coach. So he was focused on that. So they could have gotten just about anybody to average 18 to 20 wins, and he would have hung out a long, long time. What you're seeing now is a guy that averages getting into the NCAA tournament, and that's good enough to stay around for a long time. Is that good for Tennessee fans? Should that suffice? Should you be okay with that?
Let's go through history real quick since Don DeVoe. Between Don DeVoe and Rick Barnes, no coach lasted more than 6 years at Tennessee. 2 were fired for NCAA violations. One just stupidly lied about it and wouldn't have gotten fired. And we're obviously talking about Bruce Pearl, who's had the most successful run, even beyond Rick Barnes, since Don DeVoe. And the other one was fired after 1 year because of it. So, and that's who Rick Barnes took over for. So 2 fired for NCAA investigations. You had Wade Houston, who was just a terrible coach and a disaster and was hired just to get Allen Houston. You had Kevin O'Neal, who is, as you point out, ran the most boring system imaginable and also said some really offensive things a lot of times. You had Jerry Green, who decided to trash his own fan base because he just, again, rolled the ball out, let him play, but did inherit a lot of Kevin O'Neal recruits and secured a class himself. You had Buzz Peterson, who was probably the. I'm sorry.
Do you know I can do a really good Jerry Green impression?
Oh, really? Do it.
Yes. Okay, ask me a question as if I'm Jerry Green looking back on my career.
Why did you blow a 9-point lead to North Carolina by jacking threes in the second half? In the Sweet 16?
I'll tell you, we're all ready for Brendan Hayward, and we got him in foul trouble, and then Julius Peppers came off the bench, but still, it's a pretty good team. And if I guess if you don't like it, you can go to Kmart and rent a movie. They don't rent movies at Kmart, but he actually said that on ball.
He told Tennessee fans they can go to Kmart. Yes. In terms of character,
he told them to bleep off, basically.
Yes, exactly. In terms of character, probably the best person they hired was Buzz Peterson, but Buzz Peterson is your classic case of a former athlete who can't coach because he's a former athlete.
Travis says I sound like Andy Rooney. All right.
And then Bruce Pearl, and then the one I missed was Quanzo Martin, who, I mean, look, I'm not saying Quanzo was a great coach, but I understand Tennessee fans. I still thought there was a lot of pressure, and that was just a bad situation during the 3 years Quanzo was there.
You ever wonder why food's so expensive? That's Andy Rooney, who, by the way, Jerry Green never cursed me out, but Andy Rooney did. And Caleb's too young to remember, but he was the guy who, I won't do it anymore, Travis. But Andy Rooney was the guy who would basically do the kicker at the end of 60 minutes. So he had like 3 minutes to sound old and rip on young stuff. And by the way, Smoky Mountain Red brings up Buzz was Jordan's college roommate, the best man in his wedding and all that stuff. It wouldn't surprise me if it came out that they didn't even know each other, because you would think Michael Jordan, to help out his best friend and the best man in his wedding, would show up once to help your basketball program. And I covered that entire time, and he never showed up once. Can you imagine Michael Jordan had walked in Thompson Bowling just to watch a practice, what it would have done for Tennessee basketball?
Oh, it would have been amazing, but Michael doesn't. Here's the truth. Michael doesn't really like Buzz Peterson, and I'll tell you why.
I've never heard. Oh, I've never heard this. I'm super excited. Go.
So, yes. Buzz Peterson admitted in 2001, when he was hired at Tennessee, that he did not like North Carolina recruiting Michael Jordan. He didn't think Michael Jordan would fit with the team. And Michael Jordan, in his Hall of Fame speech, mentioned players and coaches who doubted him, and Buzz Peterson was specifically named in his Hall of Fame speech. And so Michael Jordan, as we all know, takes things very personal. He feels like Buzz Peterson disrespected him. He feels like Buzz Peterson, Dean Smith, to motivate Michael Jordan, put Buzz Peterson above Michael Jordan on the depth chart initially, when Michael Jordan was clearly better. So Michael Jordan genuinely has a level of vendetta against Buzz Peterson. Now, Buzz Peterson's like, hey, we're connected, so we're cool. And, Michael Jordan will be diplomatic and show up for his wedding because Buzz Peterson asked. But, yeah.
So do you think Tennessee stands by Rick Barnes until Rick Barnes is ready to retire? Or do you think do you think they say that just making the tournament's not enough?
No, I think they stand by Rick Barnes. I don't think you run off for basketball. I don't think you run off a good coach for a potentially great coach who could also be bad. I'll tell you that this was a few years ago. It was about 2016. South Carolina and Kentucky were both in the Final Four. There were 2 Final Four teams from the SEC. And you had looked at the SEC basketball landscape, and there were a bunch of really good, not great coaches. And SEC basketball was thriving, and SEC football was horrible because the SEC and football at the time had run off so many good coaches because everybody was trying to have the next Nick Saban. This must have been like 2015, 2016. This was when Gus Malzahn, Butch Jones, Kevin Sumlin, like these were the best SEC coaches outside of Nick Saban, the most successful ones at the time.